One who does not wish to be among us is to be the emissary.
So here we are at Deep Space Nine's pilot episode, Emissary. Now, Deep Space Nine is a damn good series when it comes to Star Trek. I love it, especially the pilot episode, with one big exception, and it's at the very beginning. So, before I actually start talking about the actual episode of Emissary, I actually need to talk about the next generation. Now, I know this is Deep Space Nine, but this is actually very important to cover for the first few minutes of Deep Space Nine's pilot. And the reason why it's important to cover because it completely contradicts a very important part of my favorite episode, Best of Both Worlds, from the next generation. I love this episode, so I am pissed off that they screwed up information from this episode. On Season 4's first episode, Best of Both Worlds Part 2, when the Enterprise arrives at Wolf 359, they scan the battlefield, and they scan the debris for a lot of things, including life signs. Do they find life signs? No, they don't.
Sensors are picking up several vessels, Captain.
The fleet? No active subspace fields. Negligible power readings.
Life signs.
Negative, sir.
But somehow, Ben and Jake Cisco, along with some of the other crew from the Saratoga, survive in a lifeboat. Now you're seeing the connection I was trying to get to, because obviously Emissary starts off talking about Wolf 359 and actually starts showing some events from it, from the Saratoga's point of view. The issue with this is Starfleet lost contact with all the ships in the battle, so there was no way for them to know if there were survivors or not, and obviously the Enterprise was already on its way there, so they didn't contact the Enterprise to inform them there may be survivors. And also, when the Enterprise got there, as I already said, they scanned the area, no survivors. So, unless some ship that was supposed to be there and got there late, like the Enterprise did, and found some survivors and then took them back to Starfleet, there was no life signs, which means everyone died. Everybody, including Ben Cisco. When it comes to the next generation, it makes it seem like the Enterprise is the next ship that arrives after this battle. No other ship. So that means the only person that would have been able to pick up life signs from a lifeboat would have been the Enterprise. So, how is Ben Cisco and Jake alive? But I figure that's the only way they survived it, is that they didn't. All of Deep Space Nine is Ben Cisco's heaven, and I think that's going a little far, even for Star Trek, so I don't think that's the case. I understand why they killed off Jennifer Cisco. That part's fine. I got no problem with that. But my problem is they should have used something else to have killed her. You know, some other battle, not Wolf 359. It's not like there's not other things that are going on. I mean, some sort of random phenomenon or some other kind of space battle itself would have been fine, but not Wolf 359. Now, just one more itty-bitty tiny issue when it comes to the very beginning of Deep Space Nine. It says 3 years later. Or if you check when Deep Space Nine started in comparison to its timeline that it's talking about, it's a little off, and it's more 2.5 years later, because otherwise it would be in the next generation's 7th season, not the 6th. So 3 years later is not accurate at all. It's maybe closer to 3 years, but still, saying 3 years later, there's no way for it to be 3 years later. And some of the events of Season 6 of The Next Generation happening at the same time. So unless they're showing episodes that are supposed to be future events that should be in Season 7 instead of 6, that shouldn't be possible. It should have said 2.5 years later. The other issue with this is that this means that the events of the beginning of Emissary are happening before the Battle of Wolf 359, not during the Battle of Wolf 359. So that means it would have had to be something else that killed Jennifer Cisco, not the Borg. And I got a lot to cover when it comes to the Borg, and I'll cover that on The Next Generation and Voyager. But not the first time we see the Borg on The Next Generation. I'm going to save that until the Best of Both Worlds, especially since the way I'm doing things right now. When I cover Best of Both Worlds for The Next Generation, I should be also covering Scorpion on Voyager. Should is the key word there. But, anyway, so if the events of this happened before the Battle of Wolf 359, that means Cisco can't be pissed off at Picard and treat him like a complete ass and making him feel uncomfortable, which I will cover when I get there. So the timeline with this just is not completely matching up to where it should be. There's a lot of little things that would be affecting Emissary if they had actually thought about using the correct timeline, with them saying, oh, it was 3 years later after Wolf 359. If they actually did 3 years later, it would have been before the Borg, which means he couldn't have been an ass to Picard, and a few other minor things would have been affected. But any of those changes really wouldn't have made that much of a difference. But still, there would have been some changes that would have had to been made. Not anything really important that would probably have to be covered, though. And this 3 years later issue is actually because the series airs in the middle of Season 6 of The Next Generation, and the episodes of The Next Generation coincide with this, so it couldn't be 3 years. It has to be 2.5, not 3. So going into my next point. So now let's fully focus on Deep Space Nine. Now, so that way I don't confuse the two Cisco's with anybody, including myself. When there is a scene throughout this whole series, not just here on Emissary, when there is both Cisco's, Jake and Ben, I'm going to continually saying Ben and Jake. Now, when Ben Cisco is by himself, I'm just going to call him Cisco, because it's just easier. And Jake is just going to remain Jake when it's something about Jake. So, yeah. Just to make it easier for all of us. On the holodeck of whatever ship he was on going to Deep Space Nine, Ben tells Jake,
will there be kids there?
Absolutely, lots of kids.
I'm wondering if Ben actually really believed this, or if he was saying this to make Jake feel better, because if you look at future episodes, you don't see many kids anywhere on the station. I mean, if you look at Keiko's classroom, obviously there wasn't that many in there for several reasons that are explained on the second or third episode. Anyway, when it gets to that point, it's explained, but still, for the rest of the station, you really don't see much of them, whether it's on the promenade or anywhere else. So I don't know whether or not Ben actually believed this, but I think he knew he was lying and was saying that to make Jake feel better, and I don't think he should have been lying to his kid, because that's just wrong. But it is possible he may have actually believed that what he was telling him is true. So, there's that. Now, here's my question when it comes to Ben Cisco. Why would any father want to bring his kid onto an assignment like that? Obviously, you're going to want to raise your kid yourself and all that, but being in Starfleet is dangerous. But he obviously had to have read the reports on Deep Space Nine before he got there, making it to where he knows and understands the problems that have been going on and will be continuing there within the Bajoran sector. So this is a very dangerous area to raise a kid, and you would think after he almost lost him one time, right along with his wife, he would have had Jake live with someone else. Now, I understand why he didn't want Jake to live with Jake's grandfather, because obviously Ben already explained this in future episodes, so I don't need to cover it. But he could have actually had him stay with someone else. A friend, another family member, because I'm sure the only family member he has isn't just his father. So Ben could have had Jake go somewhere else. On the station, Cisco's talking to O'Brien, walking around, and they come upon one of the Bajorans wearing a religious robe.
Please enter. The prophets await you.
Another time, perhaps.
Normally, I would say that he should have been respectful of their culture and beliefs and gone in there to, at least humor them. But Cisco is busy because he's just got this station. It's a mess. The Cardassians completely screwed it up. He's having to do a lot more things that are more priority for Starfleet than the Starfleet way of respecting their culture and, go and do that kind of stuff. So I can understand why he just said another time. But I will say, a part of me was like, you should have respected this culture and accepted to go in there. So O'Brien and Cisco get to Cisco's quarters, and Cisco asks,
Any word on our science and medical officers yet?
The first thing that came to my mind was,
The medical staff doesn't arrive till Tuesday.
So apparently tomorrow's Tuesday.
They're expected tomorrow.
That's the first thing I actually expected him to say is, your medical officer, sir, won't arrive until Tuesday. But, I've seen this one before. Obviously, it aired before Generations was even filmed, but, that was the first thing that came to my mind. Anyway. So Cisco meets Kira.
Hello.
Hi, I'm FearlessDarkElf. Well, that was rude.
Is something bothering you, Major?
You don't want to ask me that, Commander.
Why not?
Because I have the bad habit of telling the truth, even when people don't want to hear it.
Hey, me too.
I have been fighting for Bajoran independence since I was old enough to pick up a phaser. We finally drive the Cardassians out, and what do our new leaders do? They call up the Federation and invite them right in.
The Federation is only here to help.
Help us. Yes, I know. The Cardassians said the same thing 60 years ago.
Now, I can understand her anger and her mistrust, and who wouldn't? But I am getting away from that topic. So, anyway, Cisco meets Odo when he's roughing up her prisoner.
That's enough! Who the hell are you?
I'm FearlessDarkElf. Who the hell are you? Oh wait, I know who you are, Odo. So this doesn't seem like a Starfleet thing to do, to pull out the phaser and shoot beside them to get Odo to stop roughing him up. I actually see Cisco just going over there and going, hey, stop that. That is not how we handle prisoners. But I guess a phaser to the wall works just as well. It's just it doesn't seem very Starfleet. So when Kira tells Cisco that Quark probably sent Nog to go stealing those items, Cisco says,
Major, there's a Ferengi legal tradition. It's called plea bargaining. I might let the boy go, but I want something in exchange from Mr. Quark. Something very important.
Now, I don't think that Starfleet is going to approve of blackmail no matter the reason for it. Even if they are Ferengi. But you never know. Maybe they will look the other way, because that's what incompetent organizations do. They look the other way when one of their own breaks their rules. Now for the scene I really don't want to talk about, but I feel like I need to cover it. The scene where Cisco is having a conference with Picard.
Welcome to Bajor. It's been a long time, Captain.
We met before.
Yes, sir. We met in battle. I was on the Saratoga at Wolf 359.
You are an asshole, Cisco, because you have just made one of Starfleet's greatest captains feel the most uncomfortable, because you just mentioned one of the most traumatizing things that has ever happened to a human being. I'm sure next time you might want to tell a Klingon that they smell like a Romulan. Yeah, Worf will like that. Try having the balls to say something insulting to Worf, because obviously he had no problem insulting the hell out of Picard. This scene just completely pisses me off, because this just shows that Cisco is not as intelligent as he is. And Cisco's very smart, alright? Cisco would have read the reports about the Borg and what they do, which means his anger should be directed at the Borg, not Picard, because it was Picard as a Borg, not as a human being. It was Locutus of Borg, not Picard of Borg. And Cisco is smart enough to know that there is a difference, and with a distinction. So, even though some people could probably say, well, he might see it as a difference without a distinction, there is a distinction there, and Cisco is smart enough to notice it. So his anger towards Jean-Luc Picard is not necessary. His anger should be towards the Borg, because it was the Borg. Or specifically, maybe his anger should be towards the Borg Queen. So yeah, his anger being towards Picard is just wrong. And the problem is, he's just sitting here like this, and just... Yeah. I hear you, Picard. He is a superior officer, and you're there disrespecting him and just... in your fucking chair. I mean, he's not actually going, but he's obviously got the signs of, I don't want to be here. I have to do this because he's my superior officer. I'm just going to half-ass hear whatever he has to say. And I'll respond to whatever I actually manage to want to hear. Primarily, the main issue is he's being disrespectful. It doesn't matter whether or not he was the human being that got assimilated by the Borg that attacked your fucking ship that made you lose your wife, or if it was some other captain. You're supposed to be respectful to your superior officer. You don't just slump down and have this pissed off look. So yeah, I really dislike that scene, except for the part where Cisco actually does say out loud that Deep Space Nine is not the ideal place to be raising a child. Now, I like that. That was the only good part about that scene. So at the end of the meeting, he again makes Picard uncomfortable.
I'll look into it. In the meantime, however...
In the meantime, I will do the job I've been ordered to do to the best of my ability, sir.
Dismissed.
Great. So now he's going to have to go talk to Troy, and this is going to put his ass right back into therapy. Great going, Cisco. The other issue I have at this end thing, Picard wouldn't at all take that shit. He would tell him very sternly, I am your superior officer. You are supposed to talk to me with respect. Now, you were dismissed, and you were to return to Deep Space Nine immediately. And he would not be doing it in a calm kind of voice that I'm doing. So Cisco actually blackmails Quark. Now, like I said before, Starfleet would not allow this. It wouldn't matter how much good intent is behind it. They just wouldn't allow it. But that being said, I actually enjoyed this scene, especially with...
We need a community leader, and it's going to be you, Quark.
Community leader. Seems reasonable. You have all the character references of a politician.
Oh, how true that is. Could you imagine someone like Quark being president? You know what? No, forget it. That's a bad idea. Oh, that'd be a really bad idea. As far as the rest of the conversation between Quark and Cisco past that point, I really don't know where to begin. There's so much to say.
Commander, I've made a career out of knowing when to leave. And this Bajoran provisional government is far too provisional for my taste. And when governments fall, people like me are lined up and shot.
All I can really say is I think Quark is right. So yeah, it was a good scene. I just love the look on Quark's face after Cisco leaves and Odo tells him,
You know, at first, I didn't think I was going to like him.
So the next thing I want to talk about is the scene with Cisco talking to the Kai. And I gotta say that hiding a person or even an orb down underneath this holographic fountain or wading pool, I think it was more of a wading pool, but anyway, I think that's just damn smart. And watching this the first time, I never suspected it. Now, after I hadn't seen Emissary in a long time, I actually completely forgot about this part of the scene. So again, I thought it was cool seeing it again. I'm like, wow, that is cool and that is genius. I actually think that was pretty cool how they had the pool be a hologram. But did you notice that the way that the stairs are shaped is kind of similar to the Bajoran comm badge? I just couldn't help but notice it. But the main reason why I want to talk about this scene is before they go down there and he is shown the orb, or the prophet, the tear of the prophet, sorry. But anyway, before he goes down there to see the tear of the prophet, I want to talk about how she was tugging on his ear to see his paw. First, that sounds more like a Klingon term, their paw. So, let's say you've never been around a Bajoran, you don't know anything about their beliefs or anything, and one of them comes up to you and tugs your ear. Why the hell is she tugging him on the ear? This is just going to confuse and irritate the hell out of somebody. It's like, what are you doing? I'm checking your paw. Well, alright, if that's what you want to call it, but it's not there. And then you explain what the paw is, you feel like a complete idiot. Anyway, moving on. So, all this ear tugging that she's doing is to find out that he's the emissary.
Breathe.
Kaiopaka, if we could discuss...
Breathe!
Ironic. One who does not wish to be among us is to be the emissary.
Now, how the hell is tugging on an ear going to give you that? Why don't you just tug on some guy's wiener and find out what you get from that? I'm sorry. I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. So, when he actually interacts with the tear of the prophet, my question is, do you think that they're giving him I guess for a better term, a simulated version of that day that he can change and it won't affect his actual history? Or do you think that this tear of the prophets actually sent him back there and somehow it lightly affected his personal history, but not enough for it to like completely destroy what relationship they had in the future? Now, I've actually thought about this many times, and I still can't really come up with an answer because either way, both answers could actually be pretty good and acceptable. So, that's just food for thought. While he's having this experience because of the Tira prophets, he is interacting with his... I don't know whether or not at this moment to say his future wife or his deceased wife, because sadly that could be a bit complicated on however you want to look at the aspect of it. It could be either one, because technically it's both. But Anyway, he's there interacting with Jennifer. To me, the way he's going about it is, it's actually seemed planned, like how he interacted with it to try to get her attention.
You're awfully sure of yourself.
It's not every day you meet the girl you're going to marry.
Do you use this routine a lot with women?
No, never before, and never again.
Sure.
And even she agrees with me. I can't explain it. You see enough of it, it's like, okay, I know that this wasn't planned. He had no idea this was going to happen this way, but it seemed planned. Especially with him going, well, it's not every day you meet the girl you're going to marry. I mean, people actually use this line. Now, whether it works or not, it kind of depends on how smooth they are, blah, blah, blah. But people actually use this line, so you can see why she even thought that this was planned. Now, you do see Cisco later on being this smooth with Cassidy, but it's not the same. So, anyway, moving on from that. After the, I guess, profit quest, for lack of a better word for it, or vision or whatever, the Kai tells Cisco,
the Cardassians will do anything to decipher their powers.
That's because they're rich bitches. Oh, Cardassians, not... My bad. The Kai tells him to seek out the Celestial Temple.
You will find the temple. Not for Bajor. Not for the Federation. But for your own Pa.
I'm sorry, that has got to be the worst possible way to convince someone to go on a quest. And there's some bad ones with video games and movies, but to me, that's pretty bad. Don't do it for my people. Don't do it for your people. Do it for the reason that I tugged on your ear. Well, it's a good thing you didn't tug on the other place then. No, but seriously, this is the worst way to convince someone to go on a quest. And adding the sentence,
it is quite simply, Commander, the journey you have always been destined to take,
really doesn't help your cause. So, next thing I want to talk about is when Dax is with the orb and she sees the memory of her getting the symbiote from Curzon. I was actually happy to see this because I was curious from the Next Generation when they were explaining the Trills then. How exactly does this happen? And I will say there is some contradictory on how the Trills are between DS9 and the Next Generation. So anytime I cover the Trills, it's going to be based on the Deep Space Nine version of them. But I will lightly cover the Next Generation one here on Deep Space Nine, considering one episode when it comes to Dax. So, yeah, and obviously I'm going to cover the episode with the Trill on the Next Generation when I get to that episode on the Next Generation. So, I'm not saying I'm going to skip that one just because of the Trills here on DS9. And now, I want to talk about Gul Dukat. When he goes into the office talking to Cisco, you can tell that his politeness is just superficial. And then next time he showed up, I was like, ugh, this guy again. And that pretty much happens throughout the series when it comes to Gul Dukat. I never cared for him as a character. Now, don't get me wrong. He is a good villain character. And as a character, he's good at what he does. He's a good character. He is fitting for Deep Space Nine. He helps make it what it is. So I'm not saying that he is bad for the series. It's just I personally do not like him. In fact, I would actually say that if you took Gul Dukat out, you would probably take out a lot of good episodes from Deep Space Nine. So that would just be a mistake. It's just he bugs the hell out of me with how evil he can be. Not to mention he is also very superficial with everything that he does. which is something that could probably be said about every Cardassian, but more so in Gul Dukat's case than any of the other Cardassians. Now, here's the problem I actually have with Dukat. There were some episodes, because he just miraculously shows up with part of it, and then he's there for the rest of the episode, and it's like, why is he here? He shouldn't be here. He just ruined the episode. But then there are other episodes where he shows up and it is actually fitting for him to be there and it works well. And then there are those episodes where it's like, he doesn't show up. It's, why didn't he show up? This episode would have actually been better if he had, for some reason, showed up at Deep Space Nine. And this is why I'm saying that I would not ever say that he shouldn't be on the show, because he puts the spice into the mix of things. And also when it comes to this particular character, there were times along the way, well, most of the time, I'm just like, somebody just needs to kill this character off because he bugs me. But then there are the times where there's an episode where it's like, well, it's a good thing they didn't kill him off. Put simply, Dukat is one of those characters everybody wants to hate, and most do. But I'm confused as to why some fans actually start liking Dukat at the end of the series. And despite what anybody says, he did not redeem himself. You can tell with everything he was doing at the very end of the series, he was the same arrogant, pompous ass he was at the very beginning here on Emissary. He was just trying to go about it in a different way. Because you could tell, at least I could, that he was up to something. He didn't redeem himself. He just got sneakier at doing the things that he did. And you could tell he was doing it. Now let's just move on before I blow a gasket over this, because Dukat just bugs the ever-living shit out of me in so many ways. I could just make a video about it by itself. And you may think that I'm kidding, but I'm not. That's how bad he bugs me. I can make a whole video about it. Probably as long as this one's gonna be. Okay, that might be a small exaggeration, but at least a half hour worth of just talking about it. And I really don't want to do that. And even if you look at how Cisco's facial expression is, you can tell that he can tell that this is just superficial bullshit, that he's just putting on a show, and Cisco's not buying it. And this just shows how smart that Cisco can be, which is why it bugs me that they make him seem like an idiot earlier. The next scene I want to talk about is when Dax and Cisco were talking about how to get to the wormhole without the Cardassian noticing, and then they use Odo to help them out. Now, first off, I gotta say, seeing Odo transform every time I've ever seen it looks pretty damn cool. Secondly, I have a question about this. How the hell would they have pulled this off without Odo? Could they have actually been able to distract him? I don't think so. Or at least not without the help of either Quark or Garrick. And again, this is if they didn't have Odo there to help them out. And also, without Odo being there to help them out, I don't see Cisco choosing Kira for this, because any way that Bajoran would go about doing this is just going to cause massive trouble for Starfleet and Cisco specifically later on, that he's just not going to want to deal with. So, because it'd probably be a bad idea to use any Bajoran, whether it be Kira or any other one, that idea is just crossed off. Unless sending Odo to the ship was Kira's idea, which is very likely. But if that is the case, I wonder what her idea would be if Odo hadn't been there. But luckily, Odo was there to be able to help him out. I'm just kind of curious what they would have done without Odo there. And I'm also wondering, could they have actually pulled it off? So about when Cisco and Dax were coming back from the Delta Quadrant on their way through the wormhole to go back to DS9. When they got out of the runabout and were walking around, how did the wormhole aliens, aka the Prophets, make it to where Cisco and Dax were seeing two different environments? I mean, they were right next to each other, not literally directly next to each other at first, but even when they did stand side by side, it makes you wonder, how were they able to pull that off? That Cisco's seeing one area and Dax is seeing another.
It's beautiful.
You have a strange eye for beauty, Dax.
You don't think this is one of the most idyllic settings you've ever seen?
We are standing on a rock face. Do you see the storm?
It's as clear as a summer's day.
And I gotta say, the acting on this scene was actually pretty good. So when it comes to O'Brien moving the station, I think that was pretty gutsy. I mean, you're just learning the ins and outs of this station, its equipment, the computer. Don't you think that it would be a good idea to actually follow the computer's recommendation of not doing this instead of, you know what, fuck the computer, I'm going to do it anyway? I think O'Brien got lucky because he was complaining about how difficult it was to figuring these things out, and suddenly he got it to what he needed to do just fine. But in reality, I think the damn thing would have just blew up, and then we wouldn't have our 7 seasons of Deep Space Nine to watch, which would be sad. So for a quick moment, I'm going to go back to some of my comments about Dukat. Odo says,
most people in my experience wouldn't know reason if it walked up and shook their hand. You can count Gull Dukat among them.
Now, Odo is giving a pretty accurate outlook as to what to expect from Dukat anytime we see him on the screen. And yet, people seem to think that Dukat redeemed himself at the end of the series. For someone who would want to redeem themselves, first they would have to see reason. And even though Dukat claims to be a reasonable man, he's really not. So yeah, Odo's comments about Dukat are very accurate. So now I want to talk about Cisco talking to the prophets, and that's what I'm going to be calling them from now on. Because it's easier that way than constantly calling them the wormhole alien, since they never really got a proper alien species name. They're just the wormhole aliens. So it's better just to call them the prophets. So he's talking to the prophets, and we get to the point of the conversation where they tell Cisco, you exist here.
I don't want to be here.
Then why do you exist here?
I don't understand.
You exist here.
The thing is, I think Cisco would have got this immediately. I think he would pretty much understand. I mean, it is pretty obvious what they're saying. I figured it out immediately the first time I watched the episode. It's not that difficult to understand if you really think about it. Because he just can't get over it because he doesn't know how to live without her, and he keeps going through it in his head over and over, you know. If you're thinking about something enough, you see yourself there, you exist there, at least in that moment in time where you're thinking about it. Even though you're physically somewhere else, you are in your mind, you're back there with whatever the situation is. I'm not going to come up with one because, well, I just don't want to bring anything bad up for anyone that happens to be watching this and you're like, yeah, thanks for mentioning something like that. Now it's making me think of it. I don't want to do that to anybody, so just whatever the memory is. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad one, a good one. People think about good ones and they keep going back to good ones too. It's just the ones that seem to come back more often than not are the bad ones. So, it's understandable why they're saying you exist here, and I don't see why it took Cisco so many times of them asking it for him to understand the question. Or rather the statement, because they only asked, why do you exist here one time. Then after that they kept saying, but you exist here, you exist here. And that's my bad, I'm sorry about that. But the point still is that, you know, it's pretty easy to figure out what they were saying. And Cisco should have been able to get it quicker than what he did. I mean, Cisco's been able to figure out more complicated things quicker than that. Now, the next part of the conversation with the prophets that Cisco has that I want to talk about is him explaining linear time with baseball. It's an interesting metaphor, but not even close to being completely accurate. But the part of it I want to talk about is...
You value your ignorance of what is to come?
I don't know about any of you, but as for me, I do not value the ignorance of most situations.
In fact, the game wouldn't be worth playing if we knew what was going to happen.
Yes, with some situations, ignorance is bliss, but for the most part, I would rather know. Some people are not going to be happy with what I'm about to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. If we valued the ignorance of what's to come so much, we wouldn't go out there and buy movies or the DVDs of TV shows like Star Trek. Then we wouldn't have people that watch the same shows like Star Trek over and over again and enjoying it every time. They won't have the people that read the same book over and over again, or even games or music, because we would know what was to come the next time we see it and we wouldn't want to do it. It's not that we value the ignorance of what's to come, because otherwise everybody would just be like, okay, I've seen it. What's next? No, don't want to see that again. Never. We've seen it. Now, true, there are some people out there that be like, you've already seen it, why are you watching it again? Let's watch something else. Or, we've already listened to this, let's listen to something else. Hell, that's a whole nother point right there. Radio stations, they repeat the same damn songs every hour when they're new. And because if we valued the ignorance so much when it comes to radio stations, we would be like, we've already heard this song, you know the outcome of it, why are you listening to it again? If we knew the outcome of the song every time, we would have to have a lot of people constantly writing songs, constantly recording the music and the singing and blah blah blah. Eventually, the ideas would run out, and then we just wouldn't have it anymore. And then you'd be like, well, where's our entertainment? We need entertainment. We've already heard and seen everything. What else is there? So we basically become the queue, without being the queue. There is a difference between being purposely ignorant and being forced to be ignorant. When it comes to the future, we are forced to be ignorant. We have no choice but not to know what the outcome is. Now, we can suspect things. We can have very good or lousy, depending on how good people are with predicting things by knowing people. But we can predict some outcomes, and some will be right and some will be wrong. But we are completely ignorant of what the outcome is. But because we can look back and see our past, whether it be with photos or videos or just with our memories, we do value that. And we do go over those memories. And more than just one time, because we value them. At least a small part of them. Depending on the person's life, they may have a very shitty one, but there's still bound to be one or two good memories, you know. Hearing a good joke, at least that's one good memory, you know, but I'm getting beside the point on that. But anyway, we do value our past, and because of it, this makes us value the future, because it makes us want to have a better life than what we've lived or what we are living now, depending on your situation. And for some individuals, that they'll be living just as good of a life in the future as they have all the way up to this point in time. Lucky bastards. So after this part of the episode, there's really not much to talk about, because from here it's pretty much just Cardassians having a dick-waving contest against Deep Space Nine, until Cisco tows the Koch ship out of the wormhole. So even though I feel like there should be more to talk about, there's really not. So let's get to the final part of this review. So how would I rate this episode? As far as pilot episodes go, I give it a 9. Because this is the best pilot, in my opinion, of all the Star Trek pilot episodes. But like any other episode, there's going to be problems. So rating it as an episode in general, I'm going to rate it as an 8. Why an 8? First, because you can't just start a spin-off with false information. Because that's what Deep Space Nine is. It's a spin-off of The Next Generation, and technically so is Voyager. But at least Voyager didn't start off with false information. Not to say that it didn't start off with some mess-ups, but I'll get into that in my next review. The other reason for the 8 rating on Emissary is because I personally feel like they technobabbled their way out of having DS9 leave Bajor's orbit to go to the wormhole, and I don't think they had to do it that way. What would I change? Well, obviously, I would change the battle from Wolf 359 to some other battle. No, I'm fine with Jennifer Sisko dying. It's just, it needs to be accurate with the timeline. They say it should be 3 years. They need to make it 3 years. Make it a different battle, not something that's 2.5 years before this happened. So again, Jennifer Sisko's death isn't the issue, just the battle that caused her death. That's what I would change. I would have Cisco understand you exist here the first time, like I said earlier. He's not an idiot. He's figured out problems way more difficult than this. Sooner than this, he would have got it. So because the battle would not be the battle of Wolf 359, it would be a completely different one that killed Jennifer Sisko. Sisko obviously would not have a grudge towards Picard, and he would not have been a dick to him the first meeting, and he would have been fully respectful of him. So yeah, that's another change I would do. And like I said earlier, that's not something that Cisco can be mad at Picard about. It's something to be mad at the Borg about. I doubt Cisco would have seen a difference without a distinction. I truly believe he would have seen the distinction, because otherwise, why else would he have been professional and nice to Picard at the end of the episode with their second conversation? If you have that much anger towards someone who you believed killed your wife, that's not just going to go away in a matter of days, especially with Cisco's actions towards Picard in that first conference. And when I say in a matter of days, it's because I think the episode stretches out to be about 3 days worth of events. I could be wrong about that, but yeah, it's like, I am pissed at you. I don't care if you were a Borg. You killed my wife. I'll never forgive you for it. And then suddenly, Captain, I've changed my mind and I wish to stay here and be the commander of Deep Space Nine. That's not going to happen. Just being an ass, even though you're supposed to be professional, and then you're professional and even nice. It's not going to happen. Would I watch this episode again? Yes, I would. I've watched it numerous times in my life, and I'm more than happy to watch it again. As I said, it is a good episode. It's, in my opinion, the best pilot episode. So definitely worthy of being watched over and over again. The next Deep Space Nine episode review is going to be A Man Alone. The next review I am doing is going to be Star Trek Voyager's pilot episode, Caretaker. Those storms have put me a little behind on my editing and everything, so I am going to need some time to be able to catch up with my editing. So please be patient with me. This was inevitable, but I thought I had enough videos edited to start with by doing them early before I started putting them on YouTube, but apparently I was wrong. I apologize for that. So again, please be patient. This is going to take some time. And again, I'm sorry this happened. I'm just as unhappy and annoyed with it as you are. So I'll see you on Caretaker.
You know, at first, I didn't think I was going to like him.